Hi, my name is Kirsten Diefenbach, and I'm a senior English major at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Today, I'm presenting to you my senior honors thesis, which is Rhetorical Manipulation and Dissidence, the Concept of Politics and Uprising in Suzanne Collins' Hunger Games novels. In this, I argue that Collins made a purpose of showing how dystopian literature can convey a demagogic society in a way that allows the reader to recognize one, namely through Katniss's lens as a rebellion leader. My research follows all four books: The Battle of Songbirds and Snakes, The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. It is framed around Patricia Roberts Miller's Democracy, Demagoguery, and Critical Rhetoric. My first section is Demagoguery in the Hunger Games, a closer look at President Snow and President Coin. So Roberts Miller, in her piece, discusses this concept of in-groups and out-groups that are created in demagoguery. And it is a polarizing propaganda that motivates members of an in-group to hate and scapegoat some out-groups, largely by promising certainty, stability, and what Erich Fromm famously called an escape from freedom. So the capitalist demagogue, President Snow. President Snow is known as the main villain of the Hunger Games novels and the main reason to fight and to look for freedom. He maintains control over the districts by implementing the Hunger Games each year. However, in the new prequel novel that came out in 2020, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, we see young Snow in his political education, in which he's being mentored by his teacher and the Hunger Games head game maker at the time, Dr. Gall. And during this, she asks him, what is the Hunger Games purpose? And his primary response is one that he takes directly from the Treaty of Treason, which is the document forged after the Dark Days, the initial rebellion of District 13. And he says it's to punish the districts for the rebellion. This is something he was taught through the capital's education system, and it's instilled in everybody. But Dr. Gall makes it clear that there's more to it, in which she talks about this concept of humanity undressed, people's true nature if there's no structure, no capital, something that is seen in the Hunger Games. And Snow later comes to his conclusion of societal order in Pan Am based on these ideas. His main concept is this idea of the 3 C's. So control, chaos, and contract. Control in Pan Am is only maintained and chaos is only prevented if a contract is made and kept between the districts and the capital. His conclusion is that the districts need the capital so as to not to turn to chaos, even if it costs them their freedom, which he believes is greater for the whole country of Pan Am. This solidifies the capital as the in-group in the districts as the out-groups. And I say out-groups because there's 12 districts and they are all kept completely separate with no way to communicate other than being in the Hunger Games, in which they are all trying to kill each other. So Snow's conclusion is that the Hunger Games were not just to punish the districts, they're a part of the eternal war. Each one has its own battle, one we can hold in the palm of our hand, instead of waging a real war that could get out of our control. It's this constant cycle of this war that never ended, and it's reinstilled each year with the Hunger Games. And it's why the Hunger Games never truly end until the cycle is broken. On the other hand, there's President Coin. And outwardly, she works towards the freedom of the districts as the president of District 13. But later on, her ulterior motives come out. And it's clear that she's doing this for the power of Pan Am overall. After Snow is defeated, he tells Katniss Coin's plan. And this is following all of the rebellion in Mockingjay, the final novel. And she says her plan was to let the capital and districts destroy one another, and then step in to take power with 13 barely scratched. Make no mistake, she was intending to take my place right from the beginning. After all, it was 13 that started the rebellion that led to the Dark Days, and then abandoned the rest of the districts when the tide turned against it. So Coin is renewing this power-grabbing cycle and solidifying District 13 as the new in-group and capital as the new out-group. Now, we don't know if the districts are going to be counted as part of this new in-group, but it's clear that 13 has the power in the sense with Coin. Ultimately, it's Katniss who recognizes who the enemy is. Not Snow or Coin specifically, but anyone who seeks power through manipulation. This goes into my next section, from bystander to political activist, how discourse made Katniss aware. So Robert Smeller again talks about demagoguery, but also how it can be fought in a sense. So this can be done through discourse, in which he says, the goal of this discourse is not simply to impose one's will on others, nor to induce them through bargaining or threats to support one's policies, but to engage in a discourse in which citizens and their representatives, going beyond mere self-interest and limited points of view, reflect on the general interest or on their common good. Katniss and the symbolic berries, how it changed everything. If you don't know already, Katniss in the games uses these berries as a tool in a sense. So while she's in her first Hunger Games with the other District 12 tribute, Peeta, they are forced at the end to decide which one of them dies and which wins, and they are forced to kill one or the other. And neither of them want to do this. And Katniss thinks of a way to survive with Peeta too. And her whole character is based on this idea of how do I survive? How do I protect my loved ones? So she reaches around this concept of there's only one choice in all of this. And she realizes we both know they have to have a victor. So they go to eat these berries instead of kill each other. And she was right. And they're both crowned victors. And this goes against Snow's entire system and proves that humanity and justice does not just mean chaos. And it also sparks hope for change in the districts who are watching this televised program. Following this, Snow realizes how influential Katniss can be, and he attempts to manipulate Katniss into preventing another uprising by holding her loved ones over her head, along with the rest of the districts. While this works for some time, she does realize that their safety is not guaranteed in this unjust system, and they can be hurt at any time. So real change is needed to create this chance for a new life. So this idea of discourse. So Katniss has this inner battle with this concept of justice and morality and what can actually create change, not only in society, but within herself too. There are three main characters that I looked at in my research that influenced Katniss in her own rebellion against demagoguery to create lasting change, other than President Coin's movement towards it. So the first is Gale Hawthorne, and he is the character that really promotes this idea of looking towards justice and fighting for it and moving towards violence in a sense to gain it. Because he's been hurt by this system, many others have too. And he says, it can't be about just saving us anymore. Not if the rebellion's begun. You could do so much. While Peeta Mellark, the other tribute, says, only I keep wishing I could think of a way to show the Capitol they don't own me, that I'm more than just a piece in their games. And he shows Katniss that she can have this sense of individuality and think for herself, and other than what people are pushing her to do, like Snow as her tool or Coin using her as this rebellious figurehead as the Mockingjay. While Haymitch Abernathy, her mentor in the games, tells her, Katniss, when you're in the arena, you just remember who the enemy is. And it's not just about fighting the tributes in this sense. It's about fighting the unjustness of this system. So Snow, Coin, and any other who would seek power in this way. So she comes to an ultimatum at the end of Mockingjay after everything's happened, in which Coin proposes a vote to have a final symbolic Hunger Games using the children directly related to those who held the most power. It seemed to balance the need for vengeance with the least loss of life. Would this be only once, or would it be restarting the cycle all over again? These are the thoughts ruminating in Katniss's mind. She thinks, did a group of people sit around after the dark days and cast their votes on initiating the Hunger Games? Was there dissent? Did someone make a case for mercy that was beaten down by calls for the deaths of the district's children? All those people I loved, dead. And we are discussing the next Hunger Games in an attempt to avoid wasting life. Nothing has changed. Nothing will ever change now. She comes to this conclusion that this society will never work, in a sense. And while she votes yes in favor of the vote, it is meant to trick President Coin in order to gain the upper hand in this sense. And she's giving the Mockingjays support. But Katniss herself makes her own decision. And in doing so, instead of killing President Snow in their ceremony, she instead shoots Coin, defeating both demagogues and showing that Katniss can be her own individual self. She's more than just a Mockingjay. So looking at all of my research and everything, I've come to some critical questions as I continue it. And these reflect on this idea of the Hunger Games as a rhetorical form of self-reflection and the questions it begs us about our own society. And I'll leave you with these ones. How can literature lead to social change, specifically young adult dystopian literature? Collins wrote this series over 10 years ago, but it parallels to American society still. Why is this? And the prequel describes the game's political purpose and was written during serious American political turmoil. Is this just a coincidence, or did Collins use her literature as a way to initiate public discourse to combat demagoguery in America? Was my work cited? Thank you so much for watching.